Evening, everybody. It's a few minutes before 7, and I know it's a little late, but I had to get a haircut. Okay, today was kind of interesting, not overwhelming. As a matter of fact, particularly underwhelming. This was one of the more anemic rallies that I've seen, and frankly, I would have rather seen a blowout to the downside. We started slightly higher. We had, excuse me, we had the PPI numbers come out, and um, frankly, even though they didn't have much effect on the market, I think they were actually worse than the CPI, and I'll tell you why. Because PPI is producer price index, which means that the numbers that came out, uh, which were pretty much in line, um, are still not great. The month to month numbers were okay, down 0.1% versus down expected 1%. The down zero point 0.4 versus down zero point 0.3 for energy, food and energy. And the year over year number was still 8.7. Um, Not as bad as last month, but here's what you need to think about. When you're in a bear market, which clearly we are, um, stocks get revalued. And the revalue for the S&P, which is currently trading at roughly 17 times earnings, or maybe a little less because I didn't check it today versus yesterday's numbers. Um, you usually see something around fair value being 15, 14. But in a situation like this, chances are, in order for us to really get a bottom here and have hurt inflation, I'm guessing that revaluation ought to be around 12, let's say. Would not be surprised to see it at 10. Things like that happen all the time in these kind of markets if the news remains bad. Well, when you're talking about PPI, you're talking about one of two things. They're either going to raise prices, and that fuels inflation, or they're going to absorb prices, which means that their margins are going to be crushed. Or even if they do something in the middle, what you have to realize is that these numbers, producer price, they're the denominator when you come into PE. You can't have a big PE in a revaluation like this. And if they shrink margins, that's exactly what you're going to get. So even though we closed up on the day, clearly not very much, volume was down. There were more stocks down than up on both the New York and the NASDAQ. Volume was a little bit lighter than yesterday, but still a little above. We've been running about 4.3, 4.4. Yesterday was 5.1. Today was 4.8. So interesting. As far as stocks go, we had Nucor symbol NUE. I mentioned it this morning. This is really the one of the best run, most profitable steel producers. This morning we were looking at the stock at 129 and a quarter, and that was down $6.85 or 5%, based on what they were putting out as their expectations, guidance. At the end of the day, with the market up, Nucor actually closed 120 and 71 cents, down 15.39 or 11.3%. That's a lot in a stock like this. Now, we also had mortgage apps. I'm not even going to give you the number. Let's just suffice it to say, down again, as usual. The oil inventories were up 2.44 million barrels. but that was also versus last week's 8.84 million barrels. We also, as I mentioned this morning and last night, the government has said that if the price of oil goes below $80, that is where they will be buying the oil to replenish the strategic petroleum reserve. So that's really kind of important. To give you a context with which to look at today's very anemic rally, yesterday the S&P had a 237-point range, closing at the bottom. So we were down 177, and today we were up 30. To give you a little better idea about some of the other stocks, when we saw stocks like Apple going down $9 yesterday, up $1.70, $1.97 really doesn't look like much. That's the way that things were pretty much across the board. Microsoft today up $1.45. Yesterday, I don't remember what the exact number was, but I want to say down 18. So, you get these kind of moves. You had, yeah, Apple, as I said, down 9 versus up minorly. Netflix down 28. Today, Netflix up 6. So, Nvidia down 13 and change. Today, up 84 cents. I mean, we really need to see this flush out. And one of the things that I want to mention is the VIX. The VIX did, even with the market basically unchanged, the VIX actually went down $1.11. That means that without a spike to the upside back to the, let's call it 35 to 40, which is where it usually peaks, today we closed down $1.11 at 26.16. So really, there's literally nothing there. So I go along with the big negative. We haven't seen the bottom yet. I'm not talking about the bottom. I'm talking about a bottom. And, the bottom is pretty substantially lower. I mean, we're talking about 36.39 here. We're still 39.77. This is still an area of support. It has been the kind of reversion to the mean. I'd be very surprised if we didn't try 100 points lower, 120 points lower than where we are today, and that would still not be a new low. So that's where I am on this current market. This morning I told you about ALT, and it actually came down pretty hard. Now, this is the company Altimmune that was $9.93, down $10.45, or 51%. It did manage to rally back to 14.87, and that was only down $5 and change. And AKRO, which was Akero Therapeutics, yesterday I told you about it. It was 29 and change, up almost 17 or 136%. Really didn't give much of it back today, down $1.35. So, I mean, that's really the kind of pullback that you want to see. Okay, folks, the other thing that is a huge negative right here is the possibility of rail strike. If we get a rail strike, there's not going to be any way to move coal, food, any products at all. But especially on the food side, you have lots of harvesting going on in areas, fruit, vegetables, etc., which are already high priced. If they can't move them, we're not getting them. So kind of a big concern. Nat gas was the feature today. It was up about 90 cents. It was actually very strong. It's a little softer tonight. As a matter of fact, it's basically unchanged now. It was a little softer tonight, but look at this rally off this bottom. This is the area of support. We've talked about it. Today it was up 83 cents and had been up an additional 15 cents. So it was up $1 during the day, basically unchanged tonight. The oil was a bit higher. Um, the gold was slightly lower. Bitcoin continued down, but only $315. The dollar was down 18 cents. That's another one that you need to see what it looks like in context. This is something that was 107 or so. Let's see. Yesterday morning, it was a low of 107.67, closed at 109.80, up $1.45, and today it was down 17 cents. So um, this is not a great market. I'm pulling my horns back in a little bit, although we did add yesterday. We added position in Starbuck carriers because somebody's going to be carrying grain to Europe, coal to Europe, and they are the leaders. All right, everyone, I'll be back in the morning.